Before we begin, I wanted to offer a few brief reminders. You have the option to submit questions at any time during this chat, and they will be answered in the order received at the tail end of the discussion. Just click on the Q&A icon on the side of your computer screen and then type in your question. We look forward to your participation and some compelling questions. We will also archive this presentation on the live stream webinar section of Plastics News website in case you want to review the conversation or direct colleagues to watch it. Before we get started today, I wanted to run a short video from the Plastics Industry Association that will explain more about their critical role in the industry and the advantages of being a member. Let's see the video.
Be connected, be heard, be represented, be involved with the Plastics Industry Association. Plastics is the association representing the entire plastic supply chain globally, from materials and equipment suppliers to processors, converters, and recyclers. Partnering with leading brand owners, we give innovative companies the opportunity to shape our industry's future. Benefits include reduced price access to over 35 industry events each year, including one of the world's largest international plastics trade shows, NPE, the Plastics Show, taking place next year, 2021, in Orlando, Florida. To help your business thrive, Plastics provides valuable connections to industry peers, exclusive economic data, the latest standards and regulatory information, and a voice in every state and the nation's capital. At Plastics, our goal is your success. Visit plasticsindustry.org or call 202-974-5212 to learn more.
Let me introduce today's moderator. Ashley Hood Morley is Senior Director of Sustainability and Materials at the Plastics Industry Association. Ashley, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate the introduction, and just want to say I'm really excited to be here today with some of my favorite colleagues in the industry. Like Joe said, I am the Director of the Sustainability and Materials team at Plastics. Which means I have a whole host of responsibilities for our materials groups and the groups that focus on our sustainability activities, including initiatives such as our bioplastics division and our recycling committee, which is how I know the ladies that are on the panel with me today. So before we dive in, I want to offer a round of introductions. As you guys may or may not know, the Plastics Industry Association represents the full plastic supply chain, and that includes, the three major categories that are represented here by our panelists today. So I'm going to start with Holly, who's here representing our material supplier segment.
Great. So just a quick introduction about me is I've been with Eastman for 15 years. If you're not familiar with Eastman, we're a raw materials supplier. Producing a variety of different polyester products. But for me, I've actually been part of our corporate sustainability organization for the last 5 years, where we really try to translate the complexity of sustainability into actionable insights for our business partners internally. And I have spent the last 10 years focused almost exclusively on plastics and recycling. So thank you, Ashley.
Excellent. No, thanks, Holly, and welcome. So Allison, I'll kick it over to you, representing our processors segment, including part designers and mold builders.
Sure. My name is Allison Lynn. I'm the Vice President of Procurement and Sustainability at Westfall Technic. We're a fully integrated custom injection molding, and as Ashley mentioned, we have in-house design, tool building, hot runner systems, and molding. And that's important for sustainability as we build in sustainability at every step of the process so that we can make sure that there's minimal impact to the product performance or processing. I was previously at Procter & Gamble, where I worked with Mary Wagner, another one of the panelists, then also at Starbucks and Coca-Cola.
Awesome. Thanks, Allison, and thanks for joining us. And last, but only alphabetically, not least, Mary, I'll turn it over to you to talk about your role and representing our equipment manufacturer segment.
Sure, thank you, Ashley. My name is Mary Wagner, the CEO of Influx. For those who may not know, Influx is a wholly owned subsidiary of Procter & Gamble, where I have spent 30 plus years now. with a really broad background. I have not just been in the plastics industry. I've actually started in a manufacturing environment. I've sourced goods and services across the forest products industry, the chemicals industry, the energy industry. I'll throw advertising in there as well. But I also spent some time in China, and in that lens, in that context, was doing some work sourcing our physical distribution network and managing our e-commerce business. And what it really has taught me, I think, is through all of those different lenses, I've had the opportunity to really play a different kind of role in P&G's sustainability effort. I'm super excited to be part of this panel where we're going to talk about sustainability as a vector of growth and how we in the plastics industry can really help managing our environmental footprint. So thanks for having me.
Great, thank you all. So now that you know who you're hearing from today, I think we just dive right in. What we're going to talk about today, as we've mentioned, is sustainability, but I think through a little bit of a unique lens in that we want to focus on sustainability in the context of how it's used to grow business and grow your influence in the marketplace. And so, for those of us who have been in sustainability, I mean, going back years and years, we started to hear this word sustainability, and it's become a bit of a buzzword, but maybe it was only used by a handful of companies. And fast forward to today, sustainability is a real focus area for the world's leading companies. ESG investing is increasing. Customers are demanding more and more of their suppliers every single day. And I really think, the plastics industry is rising to the occasion. At our association, we work really hard not only to talk about and communicate plastics as a sustainable material of choice, but also to really connect the supply chain, to promote collaboration, to promote innovation, and to work on continuous process improvement for these manufacturing systems. So that kind of leads me to the topic that we want to kick today's session off with, which is innovation. One of the ways that our association has begun to recognize companies who are true leaders in the space of innovation is through our Refocus Innovation Awards that we hand out at our annual Refocus Sustainability Summit each year. And this year, although we had to host it virtually, we were able to award Eastman Chemical with the End of Life category award for their carbon renewal technology. So Holly, as the most recent winner of this award, and congratulations, by the way, can you talk to us a little bit more about the carbon renewal technology and just in general about, the advanced recycling space that material suppliers are getting into these days?
Sure, glad to. So first off, thank you, Ashley, and the folks at Plastics for acknowledging Eastman's contribution in this space and recognizing what we've done with carbon renewal technology. We're very excited about this technology, and what we've done is we're trying to combine the experience, the history we have around manufacturing, and insights about our markets to be able to create more transformative materials, and in this case, with this technology, by leveraging existing assets. So during 2019, one of the things that we did is we focused on really trying to reimagine an existing asset that we had in Kingsport, Tennessee, and trying to figure out how could we begin to displace the traditional fossil feedstocks and start to use plastics and other materials that have been collected for recycling. And in this technology, for carbon renewal, it's a reforming technology because we are breaking back down to such small molecules. We're going back to like CO and hydrogen and all this. It gives us a chance to use a much broader and more diverse set of feedstocks going in because almost everything goes back down to all the way to a CO and a hydrogen. So that lowest common denominator works. So what we've done is we've retrofit that asset. We've started feeding plastics into that. And we use the outputs from that technology to make acetyl molecules, which are part of our cellulose acetate products, which are some of the more senior plastics that are on the market today. So we're operating at scale today, and we actually did plan to process up to 50 million pounds in that technology this year, just to give you guys a sense of scale. But with COVID and with some of the restriction that we had into some of our assets this year, we're not going to hit the 50 million, but we're just getting started. So again, thank you, Ashley. We're really excited about this technology.
Yeah, and speaking of winners, Mary, last year Influx was able to take home the People's Choice Award at the inaugural Refocus award ceremony, which was pretty fun for your folks and for us to hand out. They were very excited about it. Talk to us about what you guys have been working on, you know, your technology and what you've been doing over the last year since your big win.
Yeah, thanks. So for those who may not know, Influx is a low constant pressure injection molding process, quite different than today's conventional injection molding. It works on any machine material or mold. So as you look at companies that are really pushing the envelope on bioresins and PCR, it has the ability to really adapt and adjust. The best analogy I think that we tend to use is when you think about adaptive driving and what happens with a car. So you look at the process of the platform that Influx uses, and it basically is able to automatically recognize changes in conditions, adapt without any processing touches. And if you think about what that does, it allows you to basically incorporate higher levels of PCR without disrupting the process. And what's interesting, it's not how Influx initially was marketed or even targeted, but it's become the biggest part of the conversation. And that adaptive technology can really help push the envelope for customers as they think about their sustainability efforts. In addition, if you design with it in mind, I mean, mostly we will go in and we'll kind of go out in the field and be able to adapt a machine. But if you build it in up front, you really can think about a low pressure process quite differently. You can upcavitate a mold, you can invest in smaller presses, and all of that has a huge impact on capital expenditures, energy footprint, and then just the conventional things that are great about the technology. So it's things that aren't possible with conventional molding, and we're super excited to continue to bring those benefits to our customers.
So very good. And Allison, you and I have exchanged several emails over the last few weeks. Westfall's doing some really exciting things as well. So I'll kick it to you to talk about some of those.
Sure. So hopefully, we're a future winner of the award with some of the projects that we're working on and some of the partnerships that we're driving here. So we really want to look at how can we drive sustainability for our customers. And one way to do that is to help them achieve their sustainability goals. We like to be very aggressive with what levels of recycled content we're able to qualify in for our customers. And we successfully achieved up to 100% in both beverage applications, fabric and home care applications. And we're even targeting medical applications, which is going to be really big because that hasn't really been trialed before. I came from the brand owner side. I spent the last 10 years of my career trying to convince my suppliers to qualify recycled materials, even at 10, 15, 20%. And I always faced a lot of pushback. It's going to increase my cycle times. It's going to impact my processing. There's going to be an upcharge because of that. And one of the reasons I joined Westfall and really like working with customers here is that we try to go for 100%, and then go down from there if 100% isn't achievable. And by looking at how we design the part, by looking at how we build the mold and account for the recycled content in the mold building process, we're able to achieve those high levels without the impact to processing that some of my suppliers had faced previously. So we really like to partner with our customers to try to drive those aggressive levels. We also have a really new, exciting partnership. I think Plastics News just covered it last week. We have a partnership with Polycarbon, which is a new startup in the biomedical life sciences space, where we're trying to collect and process and then launch and produce the first biomedical and life science products made out of recycled materials. So this is 13 billion pounds of waste that's generated every year that's currently being landfill incinerated. And we're trying to collect that and recycle it back in and produce biomedical products out of this material. And lastly, we have a partnership with a company called Bocatech to produce these reusable, recyclable foam polypropylene cups. And what's really exciting is we're trying to get to a price point that's competitive with double-walled cups so that brands don't have to choose between reusable, recyclable, and cost competitive for their customers, and trying to drive both the reuse and the recyclable options for any company that's using cups.
and I think they all use cups, right? We all do. So that's awesome. No, and so hopefully, I wanted to offer these folks an opportunity to talk about what they're doing with their own companies. So hopefully there's no, everybody's very clear now on why these are the panelists. I mean, all of these companies are doing amazing things in sustainability, and it just goes to show you that it takes every single part of the supply chain. But if I'm sitting here listening to this from the audience, right now, and maybe some people who haven't gone deep on sustainable innovations, the first thing that comes to mind is everything you just talked about requires investment. A lot of times that is time and resources, people investment. But a lot of these cases that you guys talked about, we're looking at real capital investments, whether it's, equipment installations, process changes, things like that. So, talk about, the ROI. And when we talk ROI, of course, we don't just mean black and white, what's the number associated with it. But with sustainability, I think there tends to be a bigger ROI involved beyond the numbers. So I don't know who wants to kind of take a run at that first.
Well, I'll just jump in. Allison touched a bit on the changes that we see in consumers. And so it kind of starts from this belief that you can do something with no trade-offs. It may take investment, but you can actually create an opportunity to improve performance, actually delight a consumer, delight a customer, if you're a B2B business like Influx, and actually improve the sustainability profile of what you're doing. And I think if you start with that in mind, I think one of the things we see is the ability to basically access either companies like Closed Loop that are willing to fund low interest loans to basically put some of these programs in place, but the payout can be tremendous. And P&G has done a ton of work with consumers. Obviously, 9 out of 10 consumers want to purchase a brand that supports a social or environmental cause. So when you have that, as you can actually see this as a way to build your business. It doesn't have to be an investment that's going to be difficult to pay out. It's an investment that grows the business. And I think that changes the mindset as you think about ROI. There are many innovations that we've continued to focus on, that Influx continues to look at pushing the envelope on, that P&G has. PureCycle is a technology. Yes, there's capital investment behind it, but when you can actually create use cases for materials that would have otherwise gone into the waste stream, it really, I think, changes the overall kind of economics and view, and it brings consumers and customers along with you.
Yeah, and just to piggyback a bit on what Mary mentioned, both Mary and I have worked outside of the plastics industry, and I really do think that if we don't get sustainability right in the plastics industry, the industry is not going to exist the way we know it today. It's part of our license to operate. Consumers do have the choice between plastics and other materials in many instances. So we have to get the sustainability portion right. Otherwise, our industry isn't going to look the same as it looks now 10 years from now. And we're seeing a lot of that pressure, right? We didn't see that 10 years ago, but we're seeing a lot of that pressure right now from consumers as they're making choices. And I think, as Mary said, is looking at what is important to the customer and looking at what trade-offs look like and getting really creative. Recycled content can be more expensive, but we can look at, can we design the mold differently? Can we design the part differently? Can we use technologies like Influx and qualify different virgin material so that there isn't a huge cost trade-off for the customer when they're trying to improve their sustainability footprint with recycled content. So I think it's really getting creative and looking at what's possible, innovating, right? You can't just plop recycled content in and say, all right, this is going to be what you get. Really innovating and looking at your whole process, looking at the mold design, and looking at how you're processing that material and bringing in new technologies. That'll improve the ROI as you're helping customers achieve their sustainability goals.
Yeah, and I love what you said. Sustainability is kind of the plastics industry's license to operate. I may use that and steal that, Allison, just so you know.
Go for it.
No, and so with that, I mean, that's, I think that's a real good basis on why you do the things that you do. And it goes beyond just, the desire to want to do the right thing, but, I think there's a true ROI, in terms of sometimes dollar figures, but in terms of getting new customers, retaining customers, and things like that. So, as we think about what we've all been dealing with in 2020, I mean, this has been an interesting year, right? Is that the understatement of the day? COVID has truly changed everything that we've been doing. It's changed the way we've interacted with each other. It's changed the way we're doing business. It's, I think in a sense, it's kind of changed just our priorities. So, you can see that kind of in your own personal life, but obviously that our personal lives carry directly over into business. So I'm interested to hear from you guys how, in the time that we're currently find ourselves living in, with the challenges that I know you're all facing and the priorities that you're balancing, how do you keep the focus on sustainability and on achieving your sustainability goals? Holly, I'll toss it to you if you'd like to kick us off.
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. 2020 has been an interesting year, and, at the risk of sounding a little bit like a zealot, I kind of feel like Mother Earth has put us on pause and has told us to slow down, stop traveling so much, think about your emissions. And this has really been an interesting opportunity for us to work. Now, one thing I think that we all kind of anticipated, that some of the focus around the advanced recycling technologies that we're working on and how we expect that to transform our portfolio would slow down. But what we have found is that our customers are around. Like, they're not traveling, we're not traveling. There's a lot more focus on those strategic initiatives. And so we've still continued to have really great and in-depth conversations with customers about this, and all of those types of commercial engagements are still moving forward, which is really exciting and truthfully a little surprising on the front end, but looking back at it, it makes a lot of sense. The other thing too is we've also taken this as a time at Eastman for us to kind of pause and level set and think about 2030. Let's think about our long-term goals and how do we focus on that? What's our trajectory? Where do we want to be? And so it's been a great opportunity for us to do some of that. Now, the big question, of course, is going to be is, do we go back to traveling the way that we used to? Do we go back to the big events and all of those types of things? And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. But so far, it's been a good year for sustainability.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, Ashley, I was just going to do a little bit of a build. Holly's comment about Mother Earth. I mean, to us, it's brought into very sharp focus how much our health depends on the planet and vice versa. And what's interesting is during this time, the CEO of P&G, David Taylor, if you hadn't seen, announced one of the biggest initiatives we've ever announced on climate change. He kind of used this opportunity to say, we've learned a lot. And what are we going to go do differently as a company? We serve 5 billion consumers around the world. Those consumers have a voice, and those consumers want to reduce our and save, energy, water, natural resources. And so what are we going to go do about it? So it was kind of during this time of such difficulty that we announced that we're going to be carbon neutral for the decade. And, do we have it's an aggressive goal. Do we have plans to do it 100%? Not yet. But boy, that has really rallied a different conversation. I fundamentally believe business will never go back to how it was done. We have got to make sure we are building and serving consumers, serving customers, and doing it in unique ways. We have, simple things of remote technology that we have begun. We would have just jumped on a plane and been places. We have the way we kind of consume resources to get our work done. I think we will be smarter coming out of it, and I think it will forever change in a positive way how we operate. It may not be as stressful and tough as it is right now, but I do think we'll kind of create a new normal that will actually be quite a bit healthier and more balanced going forward.
When life hands you lemons, you make lemonade. You just announce big things. I love it. Allison, feel free to chime in if you'd like.
And in a kind of a different lens, we recently announced our partnership with Polycarbon, and I think that's even more essential right now, especially because of COVID. So you can imagine the large amounts of biomedical and laboratory single-use products that are being generated right now with every single test, every single sample, all the different treatments. There's a huge amount of medical waste. And I think, the consumers now are accepting that plastics has a very real and beneficial part of our lifestyle, but we still need to figure out how to manage the waste. And the polycarbon solution is bringing a solution to that medical waste that wasn't there before. So we're really excited about that partnership. We think it's especially important now because of COVID, because we are generating so much more medical plastic waste, and we're looking to bring some circularity into that supply network, which currently doesn't exist today. So yeah, I think it's pivoting to see what's important with waste and how we look at sustainability in a COVID environment.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, that's kind of where I wanted to take this conversation next was just offering up the opportunity. I mean, the plastics industry has stepped up in such a big way during COVID. Our staff kind of rallied internally, when all of these things started happening, and we were getting, on one hand, our government affairs team was getting, just inundated with requests from FEMA and different organizations for materials. And then, our members were reaching out to us, for resources to make sure that they could get their employees, to the office, with whatever permission slips they needed in their state, or so we all rallied together. We connected the supply chain. We made things happen. Allison talked specifically about what they're doing, and I think what you mentioned, Allison, is this is a real opportunity for when the industry that is constantly under attack, we have the ability right now to kind of spin that and say, look at all the great things that we're doing. So great example that you shared with us, Allison, in terms of looking at the PPE. Holly, I know I've seen some headlines from Eastman's contributions. I don't know if you want to share anything, but I want to give you guys the opportunity to give yourself some props for anything that you've been doing kind of in this COVID response.
Yeah, the exciting thing has been is, with Eastman's materials, we tend to show up in a lot of different things like face shields and that sort of stuff. And that's been one of the big focuses. And it's gone all the way from we've been donating resin in different countries to actually donating window film that was converted into face shields, to even actually having employees who were operating on site and were making and stamping out face shields, in Kingsport. So some really exciting things there. There was also a fantastic collaboration that happened in France with one of the large cosmetic companies, and they were working on doing hand sanitizer. So we were able to help to support with bottles for that. So a lot of exciting things there, but playing in the medical space is a pretty common place for Eastman, from medical devices to cleaning products to medications and all kinds of different things with our product line. But it's been great to be able to step in and help to support with some of the areas where we've got great materials and core competencies.
Great, Mary, I'm happy if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I will. As many companies did, Procter & Gamble broadly really focused on three things. We're going to take care of our employees first. We are going to make sure we can make, pack, ship every day. We have a lot of consumers to serve around the world. So we have to keep our employees safe so that we can do that. And the third was to be a force for good in the communities in which we live and operate. Kind of globally, because, things started in the East and moved, we had kind of a front end start on masks and sanitizers. And we did that for our employees, and we did that to donate to the communities in which we lived and worked. So a massive amount of work in countries all over the world in that respect. Influx jumped into it, with injection molding process technology. We jumped into face shields. Interestingly, one of the things we did with a small team of P&G and Influx people was focus on nasal swabs. Hard to get. It wasn't the typical PPE people were looking at trying to jump in and do, but we have built multiple nasal swab molds that can help get millions and millions of swabs into the market. we actually did some work to get a fully injection molded swab that doesn't need lots of additional second steps. So, and we're doing it in a way that can be broadly available to anyone in the world. We'll open source the design. So again, to think about how plastics have served a purpose, it's been phenomenal work, and the team was really busy at the time, but did not miss a beat on its existing business commitments, and then jumped in to support the swab work, the face shield work. We don't do production. We have a mold production operation at Influx, but our Innovation and Education Center is used to do demos and training and customer work. We turned part of that into a production cell, and we're still actually making face shields today. So we're doing the headbands. That work is still in support of orders that FEMA had placed. So tons of work, and I think has really brought quite a bit into focus about how we can play a role and have our supply chains play a role in partnership with some other suppliers as well. We've done some work on the side with Westfall. Is how do we bring to market things that the communities around us need?
You couldn't have made a better segue into the next the topic. So we've talked about. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, you can even ruin my segue, but go ahead, Alice.
Sorry about that. No, I just wanted to jump in real quick because I think we actually closed the loop really well in terms of all the PPE and all the different things that are helping people right now. So we have two avenues. First, through our customers, we've been making mask part, respirator parts, testing kits, sampling kits, even disinfectant white packaging, detergent packaging. So through our customers, we've been working with a lot of responses. But similar to what Mary talked about and what Influx has been doing, we even designed our own these like ear relief straps that go behind the ears for healthcare workers, and that's been tremendously helpful for people who are wearing masks for 10, 12 hours per shift. It gives some relief to the ears, and we even designed and molded our own mask here, and it really proved out our model. So these went from design to molded parts in less than 10 days. So we've been really excited about doing that and being able to donate those to healthcare workers. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm just kidding with you. That's really good. All of this is the perfect segue into, it goes back to community impact and people, taking care of people, which is kind of that, we've hit on today, we talked about innovations and what we're all doing to take care of the environment. We've talked about why we do it in terms of, we all need to contribute to the bottom line for our businesses. But now we're starting, that was a perfect segue where you're doing all of those things, but you're also taking care of people. And when we start to think about sustainability and that social impact piece, you start looking at building a diverse workforce with an inclusive environment, which we need to keep the plastics industry on the cutting edge. The best teams that I've been on have been with people from, we have different educational backgrounds, we have different life experiences, and we come together to bring together the best pieces and parts that we've learned along the way to come out with something that's, best in class. And so that's where we segue into the fact that this panel is for ladies. And I think it's no secret that when we look around the plastics industry at events and conferences, the diversity is typically lacking. But when we start to get into that sustainability piece, it shifts. And there tends to be a broader representation of people from all backgrounds. And so what I kind of wanted to talk about was kind of two things, right? So when you think about sustainability and the female representation, why is that? Where does that come from? How did you guys get into your sustainability roles in the plastics industry? But then the second bucket is in terms of what your businesses are doing in the social impact bucket and looking at taking care of your people. I think where that relates back to a lot of our audience members who they come to us in the association all the time and they talk about workforce development. And what I've seen and the connection that I've made in the companies who are leading in sustainability is they are also the companies who have really positive things to say about their ability to recruit and retain employees. So those are kind of the two buckets. So I'm interested to hear any and all of your thoughts on women in sustainability, and how sustainability can really help, the focus on sustainability can help, drive employee recruiting and retention, that kind of thing. So, Allison, I'll maybe just kick it to you.
Sure. Yeah, so there's a lot of research that shows that the female gender role tends to be more collective and community focused in general. And I think that's why you are seeing a lot of women in sustainability. I mean, there's a reason why we say, Mother Earth. We're very focused on what type of world we are growing and what type of world we are leaving for our children. Plus, it's a newer area. So I think when there's a newer area, you have the ability to attract a different type of talent. You get to recruit from universities. So not only are we seeing more females in the space, but also younger talent. I think if you look around the plastics industry, there also is a lack of diversity in age, and the sustainability space is bringing in newer talent that we're seeing. And the younger talent has this passion for improving the world, and they don't see a job as a 9-to-5, but a way to fulfill their purpose in life. So for them, it's really about, what's my why? Why do I do? It's not a job to them. They want to know, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And do I feel like I'm fulfilling a purpose in my job? And sustainability in the plastics industry gives both younger people and females the opportunity to do that.
Either Holly, you want to jump in next?
Sure. So I think from my standpoint, it's a lot of this is around that intrinsic motivation to create a positive impact, right? And I totally agree with what Allison has shared so far. And one of the questions you asked too is like, how did I end up in this space? And the interesting thing is I don't know how many degree programs there were, for me to do sustainability and things like that when I was still in school. But for me, it was on the job. And so I started out in a market research role focused on plastics and packaging. And you could spend about 10 minutes researching there before sustainability popped up, right? And so it's one of those things that we started learning, and we started recognizing that plastics were really going to be presented with some interesting challenges. And as we needed to think across all of our different market spaces, because what we realized at Eastman is there might have been a little bit of a sustainability driver in each of the different markets, but none of them really kind of accumulated to enough to create appreciable change and to really drive the portfolio in a different direction. But when we started thinking about it, those drivers across all of the different segments, from consumer housewares to medical to packaging to all kinds of different places, it gave us a chance to think differently. And that's really how it started for me. So from my standpoint, it was a lot of on-the-job learning and then really trying to understand what the impacts were and what we could do about it. So it's been great to be able to work within a business and be able to help to drive things for a more positive outcome for our planet and for the people who live here.
Yeah, and I'll just do a really quick build. The comments I think I can resonate well with me. Over the years as a P&G employee, women are powerful consumers and women are powerful advocates for change. And I think there are so many people passionate about making sure the plastics industry participates in being on the leading edge of change and not being seen as a problem. So I do think women are, if I look at P&G, the head of our sustainability efforts, Virginia Helios is a woman. Nalini Bates manages our supplier citizenship program, which includes sustainability. Kelly Santini, who I expect is on this call, is doing that work for Influx. So I just think women are so anxious to have the ability to have a voice and drive change. And I think where there's new technology and new things that allow them to do it, I absolutely agreed with Allison's comments. We've done a ton of work at the university level. And there are so many passionate young people, and they don't want just a job. They want to make a difference. And so it's about, I want to work for a company that's going to change the world. And I find that refreshing and fun, and it's helping, bring an enthusiasm to the experience that exists. in many parts of the industry. And I think if you bring those two together, it's not about one or the other. It's about how do you bring that force together to really make change happen more quickly.
No, excellent. I mean, I agree with everything that you guys said, and frankly, I hope that one day when we have a panel of all women in the plastics industry, we don't have to go out and say, "Look at this panel of all women in the plastics industry." It'll just be a thing. But no, thank you guys. Excellent, excellent answers. And like I said, I couldn't agree with you more. So we're kind of getting close to the time that we want to shift gears and look to the audience for questions. But before we move on, I'll just ask the one final question and give you all a chance to throw out your thoughts. And Allison, I think I already know your answer, but so we can start with you again. But how do you see sustainability enabling a long future for plastics?
Yeah, again, I think, like I said before, I think it's essential for us to exist as an industry the way we are. People do have choices to use other materials in many applications, especially in the consumer product space. In the medical space, it's a little bit different, but in the consumer product space, which is a major market for plastics, people are choosing based on sustainability, and we need to change the conversation on the sustainability of plastics. We know the facts and data about it, but we need to change the hearts and minds of people who are making decisions. So I think it's absolutely essential for us to exist in this space.
Yeah, Mary, you want to?
Yeah, no, I love this concept of no trade-offs. I love this concept of how do we do something better and have it be good for our business and good for the environment. I do think there are more and more innovations that will help kind of push us down that path, and people interested in helping us get there. There are today things that kind of get in the way, and companies that we are working with today who kind of are willing to rip apart like traditional conventions. A small company, AGS, who's processing raw recycle, and they're not even going through the last pelletizing phase because it takes so much cost out, then they don't have this trade-off of it's more expensive. And so how do I get technology that exists helping us able to process that? So I think it really takes kind of a big vision and fundamentally not being told no, like it's all possible and I can do it without trade-offs. And I find that quite energizing.
Awesome. No, thank you. Holly, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that we all have to remember and just kind of keep focused on is that plastics are really a critical material to help ensure a safe and a sustainable future for all of us. And the challenge that we bumped into is we really have to figure out a solution for the waste problem, because it is blurring the view on all of the other benefits and the things that go along with plastics. But we're in a crisis today, and when you think about climate, we have to reduce the absolute amount of greenhouse gases that are being emitted into the planet. And if we did a wholesale switch out of plastics today, we would be going the wrong direction in terms of climate change. So we can't just pick one issue or the other. If the narrative is too simple, then it's probably not really truly impactful. So we have to do both. We have to manage the waste, we have to manage climate. So we need to work on both of these together. And I think from our standpoint, one of the innovations that's going to help are these advanced recycling technologies so that we can start to enable true circularity for plastics. And we have to start thinking differently about the materials that we are collecting for recycling. How are we going to sort them? How can we get to a broader mix of materials? How can we move beyond the simplest forms of packaging that are most broadly used today? And with those, it will give us a chance to actually deliver true circularity and actually create less impact on the planet. So from Eastman's standpoint, we've made a really intentional decision that any of the advanced recycling technologies that we're going to launch, that we won't launch any that have a carbon footprint that's worse than the original manufacturing or than the traditional manufacturing. And so that's the lever that we're pulling. So trying to get at that, no sacrifices, no trade-offs, but we've got to manage both at the same time. We can't ignore one of the issues. We got to manage them both.
Excellent. Well, I can't thank y'all enough for the excellent conversation. I could talk to you for much longer, but I think that now, Joe, I will turn it back over to you to see what kind of questions the audience has sent in.
Great. Well, thanks, Ashley, and all the panelists. That was a terrific conversation. Lots of interesting applications and issues that were discussed in the presentation and in the panel discussion. Excuse me. And y'all did a great job. We have lots of questions that came in. Before we get to those, I want to share some information on the Plastics Industry Association in this short video. So please roll the video.
Be connected, be heard, be represented, be involved with the Plastics Industry Association. Plastics is the association representing the entire plastic supply chain globally, from materials and equipment suppliers to processors, converters, and recyclers. Partnering with leading brand owners, we give innovative companies the opportunity to shape our industry's future. Benefits include reduced price access to over 35 industry events each year, including one of the world's largest international plastics trade shows, NPE, the Plastics Show, taking place next year, 2021, in Orlando, Florida. To help your business thrive, Plastics provides valuable connections to industry peers, exclusive economic data, the latest standards and regulatory information, and a voice in every state and the nation's capital. At Plastics, our goal is your success. Visit plasticsindustry.org or call 202-974-5212 to learn more.
Now, we'll now take questions. As a reminder, you can click on the Q&A icon on your computer screen, type in your question. Your question will be answered in the order received as we get to them, and ask away at the panelists. On to our first question, and this encompasses some of the questions that we've gotten in. What are some of the technological innovations that will need to improve in order to increase recycling rates? How will technology work into this? Maybe we'll start with this Ashley, who's done a lot with the association and with that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. No, I mean, I'm happy to kick it off. I mean, in terms of technology, the one thing that I'll mention is MRF technology, materials at MRFs. Recycling centers were built years ago to handle a very different waste stream. And so if we want to continue to collect a whole new 2020 waste stream of plastic packaging, then we're going to have to continue to innovate at the MRF level so that we can make it easier on households to just put as much as realistically possible into that bin so we can get it all back.
Actually,
a lot of it's supply chain. Go ahead, Mary.
Actually, I was just going to build. I couldn't agree more. It was an eye-opener. Kelly and I actually went to our local MRF, and I realized how many things I am putting in my recycle stream that have no end uses. And when I see kind of how it's processed, it would open people's eyes to the technology that's needed at the MRF level, the consumer education that's needed. I think it's three things. It's consumer education. And then I think the third, it is how do you create technologies that allow other uses for things that today are absolutely, part of the waste stream and not part of a solution because they're not able to be processed into something that has another life. So I think to me, it's all three of those.
Great. Holly, how about you on the materials end? How can materials be part of this solution too, from technology standpoint?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I feel like from our standpoint, what's been a big challenge for a long time is, many of these advanced recycling technologies that are coming online right now, they're not necessarily brand new and they're not dramatically different than things, but maybe historically they've not been successful economically because the drivers weren't there. So we were a little bit stuck because you couldn't get folks to collect materials because there wasn't a good end market for them. But in the meantime, you couldn't get people to make investments in advanced recycling because they didn't think they were going to be able to get feedstocks to go into them. So there's a little bit of a chicken and an egg disconnect right now that, Eastman has gone ahead and sort of put a stake in the ground and said, we're going to go for it. And so we're going to work on this. And so we're learning as we go because we don't necessarily always know how to source these materials, but we're going to try to drive demand in the marketplace and try to create in markets for those materials to help drive them to drive better collection. But the infrastructure improvements that we have, we've got to collect a broader mix of materials. We've got to be able to sort materials, and we need to start thinking about design for recyclability and bale specifications that line up with a broad mix of recycling technologies, from mechanical recycling to advanced recycling technologies, to make sure that we can create the types of feed streams that are going to be benefit, or that are going to be most useful at their highest value. And so we just really have to change our mindset and think a little bit differently as we're really looking at a pretty significant transformative change.
Yeah, and I also love I think both tied to the resin component and the sorting component. I love what P&G is doing with the Holy Grail initiative, with looking at resin tags to make it easier to sort different types of resins at the MRF level. I think Ashley from Walmart, who said it needs to be so easy that my toddler can do it, because you see people get to the bin, they get very confused what can or can't get recycled, and that's the challenge for plastics, right? Everyone knows that a can get recycled. We need to make it so easy for consumers to recycle it that they don't have to sit there and think about it and then just get frustrated and put it in the trash. So it comes to resin choice, picking resins that are more easily recyclable, better sorting technology, and using possibly, resins that are more recyclable, as well as technologies to help you differentiate the different types of resins once they get to the recycler. And then some of the more advanced technologies that Holly spoke of, like chemical recycling, that it all needs to happen for us to improve the recycling rate.
And Holly, there's a question from the audience that's related to that. Are there any materials that show some of the innovations that you discussed on that end with sustainability?
In terms of materials, you think with recycled content coming from advanced recycling technologies? So
it could be. They didn't specify, but that would make sense, I would think, that it would surround with that.
Yeah, so the way that we're approaching this right now, and I think that there's a whole fantastic host of different companies that are doing a lot of work in this space, from different depolymerization technologies for polyesters to pyrolysis and reforming technologies that allow you to go back to a little bit smaller molecules and things like that to go back into materials. And as we're looking at this right now from Eastman's standpoint, our goal with our technologies is to be able to produce the products that we sell today. So these would end up being drop-in replacements for existing materials. So if somebody uses Triton today, they could purchase Triton Renew, which incorporates recycled content, and then it doesn't have any impact on your mold design or impact on your processing. And so that's one of the ways that we're trying to do this, is we want to try to figure out how to modify our existing offerings without making our customers change how they process the material. So that's the way we've been looking at that today. So we have one of our commercial products, we have cellulose diacetate and Treva, which are a couple of our cellulosic lines that are leveraging feedstocks coming from our carbon renewal technology. And then we also have some of our more traditional copolyesters that are available through our glycolysis. So a couple of different things that are happening today.
Great. We see pyrolysis and glycolysis, some of the new technologies out there having a lot of promise. Anybody else have comments on that? If not, we'll move on to something else that's related to this. If there's anything in recycling that you wish to change out there, what would it be? If there's one area that you think could change, it really can make a huge difference. Putting you on the spot, and who wants to start that question? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Should we start again with Ashley?
No.
From the association standpoint, no.
Oh, one thing, Joe. One thing in recycling. I'm with Mary. There's so many things that we need to be working on. Kind of, she's good at counting her stuff in threes. And if I had to pick one thing, if we're talking a wish list, then I would say unlimited, access to end markets for these products, because that's what we need to drive everything. We're kind of in this chicken or egg situation a little bit, and that's why our association has been focused on in markets through our NEMO projects, because as well as a lot of other partner associations that we work with. I mean, there's such a big focus on in markets, because if we could just unlock more in markets, it's a game changer. Definitely.
Well, that actually leads to a question here too. that can basically piggyback on what Ashley just talked about. Is there enough material out there? How do you get more recycled material to meet some of these goals? And brand owners all have recycling goals. Allison knows that from the days of Coca-Cola and Procter & Gamble and elsewhere. Is there enough material to meet some of this? And how do you improve that situation? So if you want to meet some of the end user goals, how can you do that? Allison, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I would say that that's my one thing that I would change to make recycling more cost effective so that we can get more recycled materials, right? We see a lot of times, for instance, I live in California, which is one of the greener states, but the recycling trucks only comes once every 2 weeks, where the trash truck comes every week. So we got to make it more accessible and more cost effective for people to recycle so that they will start doing that. So either de-incentivize landfilling or incentivize recycling, whichever way you want to look at it. We got to make it harder for people to landfill and easier for people to recycle and more cost effective, because that's their personal ROI. We've talked a lot about ROI in this conversation. We got to take it down to the consumer level. What is their ROI to recycle, and how do we make it extremely easy for them? Because otherwise we're not going to be able to get all that material. Recycling rates are still abysmally low in the US. So unless we change consumer behavior and change the access and the cost efficiency for them to recycle, we're not going to be able to get the amount of materials that we need for all of the brand owners to meet their sustainability goals.
Yeah, Joe, I will echo that a bit. P&G has done extensive work with all of its brands around the world. And if we wanted the purest dreams of PCR, we can't afford it, and there's not enough of it. I mean, it's just not in today's environment. So I don't think there's any one answer. I think some of the things that Eastman's doing, as Holly mentioned, and I mean, I used to buy this stuff. And so, to say there is stuff going on in the back that makes it no difference to me, that's great, but I don't want to have to pay for it. So how do you open up a window? And part of what P&G is doing is saying, what are all the grades? What are all the ways to increase use? And maybe it's not a one size fits all. How do technologies like Influx help you process it? How do the work with MRFs, how do things like the Holy Grail, which Allison had mentioned, allow us to collect more of it? So I think all of that will have to come into play. I don't think there is one answer. I think we've got to keep a really holistic overview of all those solutions are needed in order for us to, I think, really make progress.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot that needs to be done. What are your thoughts on curbside recycling? Are there improvements that are needed there also, as far as the consumer standpoint of collecting material? Holly's nodding her head.
Yeah, I mean, just take a look at what's happening right now. I mean, we're all still starting to feel a lot of the effects from National Sword. We're watching recycling programs kind of crumbling in a lot of communities right now, where they've stopped collecting, or they might still be collecting, but it's now going to landfill. And so you see a lot of those things happening, which is horrible. And I think from my standpoint, and so I know there's some folks on the call who work really hard on the equipment manufacturing and all of that. But if we want to make this simple enough for a toddler to use, then the consumer should not have to make a choice about what goes into the bin.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's the easiest way to get all of the material in there. Now, that is a very simple statement for me to make. So please don't start sending me hate mail and telling me that I don't understand how this works, because I know how hard the challenge is going to be with this. But that's what we ought to be aspiring to. So whether it's, the pitcher from your Shark Ninja blender that you want to recycle, or if it's the bottle that you used, that your milk came in, the consumer should be able to put those plastic items into the bin. And so how do we get to the point that we start thinking broadly about material recycling and not bottle recycling? Because truthfully, across most of the US, we do bottle recycling pretty well. You get outside of that, you get into thermoforms and you get into jars, and we don't do it as well. But we've got to figure that out. We've got to figure out how to handle those materials too.
Sure. Any other comments from anybody? I know Alice is nodding her head.
Oh, no, I just say, from my days at P&G and Coca-Cola, you just got to make it really easy for consumers. And I completely agree with Holly. It's very hard. It's very complex. I know that recyclers, I've been to probably over 40 MRFs. It's difficult to sort all those different materials, but a lot of the work that the plastics industry is doing with MRF technology, all that is necessary to make it extremely easy for consumers. I had someone tell me once that the number at the number on the plastics is the number of times you can use something. And that just shows how confused people are about numbers and how confused people are about what can or can't be recycled. So we got to figure out a way to make it easy, or people just aren't going to do it.
Yeah.
P&G
Go ahead, Mary.
I was going to say, we have actually tried to make changes in packaging, which were more sustainable, but the consumer didn't get it. And so, the education associated with what it's going to take to, I think, change the game is huge. I think those are great points.
Does there need to be a change in some of the labeling of packaging and the number system that we use now? There are a few questions on that in this too. And does that need to be revamped somehow also?
I do like the recycle label because it makes it really easy.
Recycle labels, yeah.
Yeah, I do, and I love, would love to see more increased adoption of the how to recycle label. But even then, there's limitations of what can or can't be recycled because mixed plastics or certain formats can't be recycled. So how do we take that label, but then make it easier for more things to be in the recyclable category for that label?
Great. Well, let's move on to another subject, and that's consumer perceptions of plastics and sustainability. How can that change, and what needs to be done in that area in a consumer standpoint? So plastics is seen as a positive material for change and for sustainability. Who wants to start with that?
Well,
Anybody?
Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, obviously P&G is doing a ton in this. There is work in some cases to basically move out of plastics. It's about reduced usage, but where we have that usage, it is not about plastics being bad. It's about the waste associated with not being able to go manage that. So I do think that we have to get clear what language we're using. It's, it's not about plastics being evil. It's about waste, and we don't want things in the ocean, and we don't want things going into landfills. So how do we focus our energy and effort on that whole piece of it? I think that's the consumer education. We will reduce our usage for sure, but it isn't at all, when you really understand life cycle, it isn't all about plastics being bad or in going away.
And I really think people don't listen to facts and data, right? Like Mary mentioned, P&G has launched a lot of more sustainable initiatives, and people didn't get it. I do think that that the plastics industry needs to build more connections with NGOs, because consumers believe NGOs like WWF and some of the other organizations out there. So it's about making them advocates for the plastics industry, because quite honestly, as much as we say, hey, plastics has a better carbon footprint and we have the data to back it up, people don't believe it when we say it as an industry. People believe it when an NGO tells them that, hey, plastics can be good in these applications. So, I think the partnership that the US Pact has with WWF and those types of partnerships are essential to get the message out and change the consumer perception of plastics and sustainability.
Great. Well, with that, I think it's time to wrap up. We went a couple minutes longer, but some good conversation here, so I want to keep it going for a few minutes. But with that, I want to thank all our panelists again and for the terrific comments during this discussion, and for all your questions that were sent in too. I want to thank everybody for attending this live stream conversation that was presented by the Plastics Industry Association. And I want to especially thank Ashley Hood-Morley of Plastics for moderating this discussion with our three panelists, Allison Lynn of Westfall Technique, Holly Alexander of Eastman Chemical, and Mary Wagner of Influx.